Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. I may seem old to some or even many of you, but I'm not so old that I remember World War II. Not only do I not remember it, I wasn't born while it happened, nor was I born during the Korean War. I was, however, born, and to a small degree, near the end, aware of it. Which is not at all the same thing as being alive and aware during World War II. Vietnam, as horrible as it was a distant war in a distant land. And that's a profoundly different experience than having war on your own territory. That's, even though it's a mild stretch, that hasn't happened since World War II and the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Which is why I remember September 11th, 2001, with the television on, watching the second airplane run into the second of the Twin Towers, thinking to myself, is this what it feels like when you know everything's going to change because your nation is going to war? Well, the attacks on 9/11 did lead to American engagement in war, but apart from those attacks, the war again was fought in foreign lands. It wasn't the same experience. It wasn't as world-changing as it seemed it might be that day. Well, as I am recording today, we are a few days into the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I have, in a sense, been trying to sort of mentally record my own emotional experience while being busy praying for those involved. And wondering, where is this going to end up? Is this going to be a tragedy for Ukrainians? Or is this going to drag the United States into a war in Ukraine? Or is this going to be sort of the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand leading into a world-sized war? Obviously, I don't know the answer to the question. I do know this, and I have been sort of trying to make this point now as long as I can remember. I know that there is a propensity among theological conservatives to also be politically conservative. I'm glad for that. I wish that theological conservatives would be more politically conservative. I'm in favor of that. However, there is a distinction in the history of political thought in the United States between what we might call PaleoConservatism and NeoConservatism. Paleo obviously means old conservatism, and neoconservatism means new conservatism. And I've said before on this podcast, if you want to know what a neo anything really is, all you need to do is take the E out of neo. The neo-Orthodox theologians have no orthodoxy, and I would suggest that neo-conservative folks politically have no conservative principles at work in their worldview. Well, what is the difference practically speaking? Neoconservatives tend to be what we might call big government conservatives. They might propose some level of fiscal insanity that's slightly less insane than the democratic fiscal insanity. And that is sort of where they might get that title of conservative. But they are big government conservatives, but they tend to be more interested in how does it go? Butter and boats or something like that. More interested in growing government militarily, growing empire across the globe, and less interested in social programs. So the sort of conservatives who grow the size of government by growing the size of the armed forces, whereas the Democrats like to grow the size of government by growing the size of social programs. So that's a fair summary. Well, a paleoconservative is someone whose conservative thought extends back to the Founding Fathers, to John Randolph of Roanoke, through along the way, maybe through who are some of these fellows? The University of Chicago guys, M. Stanton Evans, but I don't want to miss Russell Kirk, obviously, is very, very big in that. And for a time, William F. Buckley was a paleoconservative. It was just during the Gulf War when there was a radical shift in his thinking and the thinking at National Review magazine that pushed out I can't even believe I can't remember his name, but there's one of my favorite columnists, wonderful, Joseph Sobran. They pushed Joseph Sobran out because he was a paleoconservative and they had embraced, again, big government and empire. Now, my concern is with the theological conservatives who have come to embrace a neoconservative understanding of the role of the federal government, particularly the role of the federal government around the globe. The neoconservatives are the guys who are actively encouraging first influence and power and prestige and ultimately presence around the globe. You may have seen that meme that shows a map of the Middle East with right in the center of it is Iraq, and then it has markers for all the U.S. government's military bases just encircling Iraq. And the comment is something like, here's how you can know that Iraq, or at the time Saddam Hussein, is wanting to make war with America. Look how he placed his country right in the center of all of our army bases. Yeah, that's the neoconservative position. And every time some nation that we're not currently friends with determines that it would be in their best interest to invade or harm or mistreat a neighboring nation, that's when the neocons ramp up the war machine. And unfortunately, I'm afraid too many Christians go along for the ride. Now, I'm not trying to say that there can't be an attempt to give a principled defense of a more active military posture with respect to the war in Ukraine. I don't think there is, but I'm not trying to disparage those who have a thoughtful, informed by just war theory, at least idea about why that means we should be there. I think there's just more a kind of general almost pride in the country's standing as a world power. One of the ways you'll notice that this comes up is you hear people in these kinds of days talking about we need to do this, we need to do that. And it really struck me this time because we are coming up to this war issue right on the heels of a great national divide, and in fact, international divide, if you want to include Canada and Australia and France, over COVID vaccines. That for conservatives, when there was increasing pushes to make the vaccine mandatory, It was people who were pushing that mandatory, saying, we need to do this. We need to do that. We need to make sure everybody's vaccinated. We need to keep unvaccinated people away. We need to put unvaccinated people in camps. And, my response was all along the way, look, if you want to get the vaccine, go right ahead. I'm not trying to stop anybody from getting the vaccine. In fact, I have friends who got the vaccine, people that I care about who got the vaccine, and I have no interest in arguing with them about it or fussing at them about it. That's not the issue. In fact, I've said all along, I don't really have a strong opinion about the vaccine per se. I have a strong opinion about mandates. Well, now, all of a sudden, it's the same people who didn't like other people telling them that they had to get a shot, talking about how we need to go to war. And I've never heard one of these people who are saying we need to go to war who is in the military, who is apt to be harmed. What they mean by we need to go help the Ukrainians is you need to go help the Ukrainians. Well, my posture is exactly the same. I'm not in any way wanting to discount or minimize anything that's going on over there, make it small potatoes, or make Putin out to be a good guy. Heavens to Betsy, no. But if it's bad enough, please hear me, if it's bad enough that the United States should be going to war, then it's bad enough for the people who think that to volunteer first. And by the way, the United States, we don't have to go to war for you to go to war and fight to free and protect these Ukrainians. Are you following me now? Again, I'm not trying to be ugly. I'm not trying to be partisan. I'm not trying to make fun of anybody, but I am saying here's a vital lesson for us to learn in the midst of this. It's not right for a majority to send a minority off to a war that doesn't meet the standards of just war. Are you hearing me? It's not just for a majority to vote or to vote for politicians who then invoke War Powers Acts or declare war and send folks off to die for wars that don't measure up to just war theory. And what kind of response can I say? Well, I can expect people to jump up and down and yell about how horrible Putin is. And again, I'm not disputing that. I expect people to jump up and down and talk about the humanitarian necessity of rescuing these Ukrainians. And again, I have no quarrel with that. I will say this. What about the peoples in China who've been oppressed? What I've noticed is when we're ready to send our troops into faraway countries to fight, it's always countries that we pretty well are certain we can take. When it's suddenly someone that might actually make a fight out of it, then we're much less concerned. There are human rights horrors going on in China that make Putin look like a Girl Scout. But thus far, nobody's been saying, hey, let's go to China. Again, simple policy, simple principle. If you think it's bad enough to send somebody else's son off to die, then you need to be willing to go off to die. Not just willing, you need to do it. It's very easy to say it's important enough for you to make a sacrifice over. That's what they do on the social scale here with the Democrats as well. How important is it to spend money to make sure that people get X? Well, whose money are we spending? If it's not mine, then it could be minimally important, and I still think we ought to do it. Because it's not my money. But if it's my money, well, that's different. So, friends, I'm asking you, please be careful. Don't get caught up in war fervor. Don't get caught up in rhetoric. Don't get caught up in the divisions that tend to drive us, the tribes on the internet. Have some caution. Have some care. acknowledge what we can all agree on. It's a horrible thing for one country to invade another. Putin is a terrible guy. But that's not what impacts us immediately. The real question is, what is the responsibility on the United States federal government according to God's word, according to the Constitution, according to natural law? And let me tell you, that's 3 strikes and you're out if you think we should go to war in Ukraine. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.